I would start as it is the time as I mentioned in the calendar to me. So um, I would start with thanking MUN Impact Global Summit 2.0. Thanks for the invitation to be a speaker here. It's a privilege and honor to speak to a lot of young people out here, maybe today live or probably after this recording should be available to most of people to watch it around. So let me start with who I am. Um, I'm Neeshad Shafi. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Arab Youth Climate Movement Qatar, here based in the Middle East. So I just want to take through who we are and what we do here in Qatar and in the Middle East as a regional organization. And then I come back to the topic around what we can do as a climate activism in a post-COVID world. So the motto of Arab Youth Climate Movement is to awakening the ecological consciousness of the community in Qatar and the Gulf and the Middle East countries. So Arab Youth Climate Movement Qatar is one of the registered and the only registered and nonprofit youth-led organization here in the state of Qatar, focusing on raising environmental awareness from a very grassroots level, especially targeting young people. We try to be, or we seek to be an informed voice in terms of raising awareness and also the relevant local environment. And we want to develop scientific and technological knowledge of young people in order to make them, ready to take the necessary actions through, scientific knowledge. And also promoting active participation, especially our region is not very known for having community engagement. Volunteerism, it's not a very at the highest level, like I would say, but there is a transforming change happening. Also reaching out to community through publishing research journals and articles and reports, and also using social media with the relevant information from the region, both in the regional and English as a language. So we have our key objectives and how we go through is our missions and vision of AYCM is to build and empower young people to take necessary actions and advocate for environment in Qatar and the region. So we try to understand the problem what we're facing, and we understand that we go through a lot of information which is necessary in terms of climate change, loss of biodiversity, exhaustion of natural resources, and if no action is taken, there are serious consequences of public health, lifestyle, and economy. So what we try to build up is a holistic environmental education for young and adults and sustained grassroots engagement within the community and learning environment to develop skills to make environmental advocates. So this is what we exactly does here in Qatar and the region. The principles are pretty much key. It's like foster to positive vision and creativity, experimental and learning network, and collaborate and look for synergies. So we work around a couple of projects which are key. One is grassroots environmental education and awareness, capacity building and community development and policy and advocacy. So this is the overall what Arab Youth Climate Movement Qatar does here in Qatar. So this is the background of what we do, and I've been fortunate enough to run climate advocacy organization here in Qatar. We started as a very, like everyone else, it's a small group of young people back in 2015 when we were all like about to get out of the university and wanted to advocate for environment. And that's when the whole idea of Arab Youth Climate Movement Qatar came into picture. And of course, it had a lot of ups and downs. Definitely back in 2015, climate advocacy was not that charming as what it is now, to be frank. And also impacts were not very abundantly seen in local news as how it is now. So it was like a marching against the time to bring the people and the community behind you to understand the issues of climate change. So year after year, the predominant young people here in Qatar started to understand the issues of climate change and brought them to the mainstream media, mainstream communication, and mainstream discussion here in Qatar. So given our work over the years in 2019, we applied to become the nonprofit association, which is nonprofit association instead of other, which is not very easy, to be frank, given the fact in the most of the Middle Eastern countries having a nonprofit organization which is completely run with young people are very rare. And we were the rarest of rare to we have one here in Qatar, and we were fortunate to run this organization ever since it was officially inducted in 2019 May as a youth-led nonprofit association. And we've been fortunate to work with NGOs across the globe, from Climate Cardinals, from Greenpeace, 350.org, Climate Action International, and also Greenpeace Arab World, etc. So over the years, what we realized, the whole climate advocacy need to reventure and come back in a faster phase. That is when COVID hit. So what COVID has shown us is something what very people discussed, and I keep emphasizing during my past many engagements online, that people started sharing some of the remarkable images of nature when during the COVID times, that's showcasing that how nature recovers itself. And it was a buzz in the social media, and even here in the Middle East, people started talking about environment, which is not that very usual when people are so busy and run behind luxury, run behind lifestyles, run behind things that matters to them on a personal level, and thinking about environment, which is secondary to most of the people here in our part of the world and across the globe. It stays the same. And that's when the COVID hit, and the whole videos of the dolphin evolving in the Venice rivers and some of the pollution-free Himalayas been seen in a decade now, and pollution-free Las Vegas. There was another big news here in the United States, and a lot of such news has made a huge media buzz here in Qatar. Also, we had the sea dogons appearing, and migratory birds flying through and coming to purging in the Qatari waters was a big news. And that is what something hit us, and myself and our organization started to realize that when people are at ease and sitting at them in the comforts of their home, because they were privileged and to be at home when COVID hit, at the safety of and all the supports given by the health workers here in Qatar and across the world, people started to realize that the beauty of the nature was amazing. And that was something very, very understanding, that when you are free and when you have an abundant time to look around and you understand how magnificent our surrounding and our nature and environment itself, people didn't realize that these were there all through the year. It was not just COVID that brought them there. Of course, there are some instances when some of the places which are human inhabited and animals or the plants or whatever the ecosystem was pristaining had to move back because human settlement came in, or human movement around activities made them to move away from that given places. But unlike those were there always, but we as human beings didn't have the time to see that. And during one of my conversations, the early March, April, when there was a great discussion around such images passing about all across the social media, I was very skeptical about people's understanding of the environment, because I knew going back post-COVID, how would we see all those things? Because when this discussion happened, a lot of them put the similarities of the COVID impact and climate change as something really nobody is ready to look after. The COVID hit, we knew how vulnerable our health sector, how vulnerable human beings are, how vulnerable our countries and the world are. It's the same that comes to climate change. And the discussion around this was so comparatively done, how climate change and COVID were so interlinked, that the understanding would definitely yield when we come out of the COVID problem. So I was very skeptical, and I keep telling in my calls and the videos or in the social media engagements that people have to be careful, because the post-COVID world we are talking about should be a new norm. And now, as we move towards a post-COVID world, unlike many of the parts of the world, people are moving towards a post-COVID world. Lockdowns have been relaxed, especially here in the Gulf and Middle East countries. The number of COVID cases come down, and but you have seen the second waves coming in the Europe and in the Americas and in South Asia. The problem is when people start understanding that we are moving towards a post-COVID world, the systems start running. We were talking about emission reductions. We were talking about achieving Paris goal because the COVID gave an opportunity to change that. And we as climate activists and advocates were like so happy as seeing that, oh, this is the change we wanted. This was something hit in the gut that nature shown human being that how vulnerable you are, and taking action now to making sure that our future is more sustainable and than ever before. But now we are seeing the post-COVID world is not what we wanted. The governments and their all this bailing out of institutions and fossil fuel-based country companies have been very frequent. You take it either in the Asias or Americas or Europe, this tendency has been going in a very wrong way. The Great Green Deal, which has been spoken a lot during COVID times, and like any times during elections, had a similar story. Now we don't hear COVID Green Deal token or taken up at the very highest level. Our conversation has been brought down just at the EU summit, which was recently held in Europe. But there was a huge discussion here in the Middle East too. Energy transition, it was never before they had this discussion, because how you have known how much the oil price came down, because the whole COVID made human system to be on a stock, and there was no requirement of oil in the market. That crushed Saudi Arabia and many of the Middle East countries here. But the problem is that once we are moving towards a post-COVID, these things are coming back in a double barrel. They are pumping more oil and fossil fuel-based ingredients to the market than ever before. And it's again, just to making sure to get back on the market, they are sending it cheaper, making ease for countries to purchase it now. So there have been never since pre-COVID that environmental advocates have to watch the news and understand the facts that going to post-COVID world, our work has not reduced. What we thought that people understood the impacts of COVID has to do with the similarities to the climate change has been a big myth. Nothing has changed. In fact, what I and other advocates have been seeing is that it's going worse than what it used to be. People are back to business as usual. This is what not exactly we wanted. We thought the post-COVID world would have been a much better, because we understood how vulnerable we are and how vulnerable our infrastructure, our economic system were. And now we are moving to a world which is not no different in the post-COVID world. So this is the right time where the activists like you and others around the world who are listening to us today or will be watching this video later on to understand that our activism has to be doubled or tripled than what is to be in the pre-COVID world. Because there we were campaigning, where we are doing social media advocacies, we are attending calls, we were talking to our mayors and MPs and our ministers responsible for, or government responsible for, and you are forcing fossil fuel industries to make sure they come up with the latest plans to mitigate their emissions. Then we thought COVID gave an opportunity to do that. And now what we realize that we are going back to business as usual. This cannot be let. So my say to all of you who have been here is that our work has been tripled. We need to start where we left back. We need to make sure that we take care of the social distancing and all the precautionary health advisories from the medical bulletin or medical advisors you receive in your respective countries, but never to back down, because there's not time to back down. The things we believe that people, all including our community, that we realize that they understood what is happening around. Now, given the fact that what they saw during the COVID times, the nature recovering from himself was a huge myth, because that didn't happen. Even the emission cut we believe to be cut because of the human non-mobility and people stuck in back their homes because of the lockdown didn't have any drastic impact on the emissions, because as you know, our utilities and infrastructures are based on fossil fuel industries. So even you sit at home or you sit at your office or you're driving, things are moving without your knowledge. That is where the change should happen too. Now, given the post-COVID, your advocacy has to be tripled down in a way. How much time you dedicate has to be now 3 times how it is to be. Because now is the time you push your governments to make sure that coming year, they make the necessary emission cuts that is necessary or as a part of their Paris signatories before they submit their NDCs later this year as a part of the Paris Climate Agreement signatory countries. This cannot be backed down. And given how countries can go towards nature-based solutions, this is the greatest opportunity to see, because how nature recovered was the greatest way to message to the humanity that how our nature itself can recover if we give the certain time to do it of itself. But given the human greedy and economic aspirations, we don't see that, because we want to bring back economy through businesses. And that is by polluting our environment, that is to misusing our ecosystem, that is to killing our animals and biodiversity. Either way, this cannot happen. And what we have to do at this point of time, one, make sure that you advocate to your legislator to make sure that he understands that you as a young people has not backed down. Two, you make sure you take all the health precautionaries to make sure you are safe, and you make sure people around you safe, and you meet up with all necessary things to advocate or march towards your necessary countries' prescribed law bodies. Three, making sure that you bring back all those young people back to the streets or back to the social media where you used to campaign for, and bring them and put the message clear that this time you're not going to back down. And we should be making sure that we knew COVID taught us a lesson and we have not learned yet. This is the most important message you have to try to convey to your community, telling that whatever the dramatic videos and viral videos we saw of environment recovering, he's not really doing that, because given the post-COVID, we are going back to what used to be. And four, making sure that you as a young leader stay at the top of what you are supposed to do. That is leading your community, leading your society, leading the younger generation of people towards what is we were always looking for, a future that is sustainable for all, a livable world for all of us, including ourselves and our ancestors, our forefathers, and whatever left for us should be given for our younger generations too, and they take it forward. And we should make sure that this is a battle about our future, which all of us has the privilege to live in. Not only not the privileged, only one, underprivileged and privileged, everybody has to live in. But the biggest concern is that the lessons we learned are never implemented. And this is going to be a new norm. This is what the new norm is all about. Because what we see in the post-COVID world is, again, a business as usual. Maybe some good hopes were happening around the discussions, or government or head of states were having great discussions during COVID, telling that there wouldn't be any bailing out, or there wouldn't be, governments would be funding fossil fuel industries in the post-COVID world. But what we see is the other way. In order to bring back economy and jobs, they are going back to what it used to be. Yes, we need jobs, we need our economy back, but this is the greatest opportunity to invest in our away from fossil fuel, find jobs in renewables, find jobs and create economy outside the fossil fuel industries. This was the greatest opportunity. And if we lose this, we wouldn't get another chance. Next chance would be more dramatic and drastic impacts that I don't think would have a catastrophic impact on the humanity, worse than what we see through COVID. So let's warn our own society, our own people, and understand what we saw was a glimpse of what a climate change could do. And the impacts have been very severe these days. You have seen the drowning, you have seen the sinking of many of the countries, you have seen dramatic glaciers coming out in the Antarctica and the Arctic. It are the warning bells seen after and after, but still we have not learned. And we also saw the dramatic videos of nature recovering of itself. That is also didn't open our eyes. That is what I say. This is not the time to bend back and say, we have done our job. Now is the time to government to act. They are not going to do that soon, because in the name of bringing back jobs and economy, they are going to go back to what it used to be. Pro-industry, pro-fossil fuel industry, pro-political parties would take up sort of corruption money to bring those to other election campaigns. So this is absolutely a necessity for young people like you and us to understand the politics behind the post-COVID world and all those glimpses and warmth and promises even during COVID, telling that they would make sure that there is no subsidies provided, there is no making sure there is no bailing out of fossil industries or airline industries, making sure that they invest in institutions and industries that are renewable or capable of renewable source of energy or infrastructure. And this is what not happening at this point of time. And my idea of this sort of call to action is that for young people like us is not to bend back. Which part of the world or which country you live in doesn't matter, because none countries keeping their promise what they are supposed to do during the post-COVID. All those great promises in Paris Agreement, in the pre-COVID times when they were warming, they're telling that, yes, we have learned our lessons and we're going to do what is necessary to make sure our future generation has the best life that is possible. But this is not happening. And that is why we need to make sure that they keep their promises. And that can be only done by pressurizing them. Use all means of your communication skills. Maybe social media, you might be great. Go ahead with that. Maybe you're great at writing stuff on articles and newspapers in any of the languages in whichever part of the world you're living in. That is another way of pushing or bringing back to getting also community on board. Do sort of, local march, if that is what your country does, into do a sort of people gathering with all the safety necessaries. Do sort of awareness video campaigns to bring back the community, telling that, yes, we saw what COVID did to us. We saw what climate change did to us. Now, given that how it used to be, to have a new reset or a new norm, we need to make sure these necessary things have been done. And if that is not done, I mean, it would be another lost opportunity and we wouldn't get another chance. So this is why I call upon young people like you and us to push forward. Use whatever things you are good at. Not necessarily you have to do this or that. You can do all those things. You can be an advocate. You can push young people to take action. You can talk to industry leaders about the new renewable technologies that are out there, new way of recovering using the nature-based solution. These are out there. There are reports and science and proofs which can be taught. And using reliable news, reliable sources of reading, and talking to community. Maybe some of the community, there is a huge issue with languages. So make sure in a country you use the language that is easily accessible by common people. And the idea is to reach out to every young people that is possible and getting them behind you. Because this battle is never won and it will be never won until we get what is required to make sure our futures are brighter and sustainable and greener and where everybody lives in peace and harmony and coexistence. So I call upon everybody to understand what is happening around, because many of the times when I had the conversations, people were lost with all those government promises which has been done during COVID times, that they wouldn't be bailing out and they would now fund any fossil industries. They would go towards renewable. They would look after some of the ideas of nature-based recovery, etc. But none is happening. I mean, this is the right time to jump into and ask the right questions to our leaders, our corporates, our industry leaders, or your local leaders who is responsible for your community or your municipalities or regions or your governorate. Go to them, talk to them, understand what they've been doing ever since COVID hit them and what are the recovery plans. So understand the basic things, what's happening, and then check with your local community leaders to understand what is they think is happening really on the ground. And then that is what you need to understand, what is being done and what has to be done now from there on. So once that information is clear and understood, bring all your young people behind you. And that is when you call for action. Ask your regional representatives to make sure they abide toward their promises and keep pressurizing, use whatever means back in your own respective countries to make them understand that we young people in a post-COVID world has never given up hope, that there is a huge hope that our future will be brighter and beautiful than what it used to be in the past. So I look forward if you have any questions, and let me know if you are doing any great work back in your countries. And I would love to share here with my show now. So if you have any questions, if you have any good practices you've been doing, do let us know. Let our spectators get a glimpse of some of the great or good practices you've been doing, so that it may or may not resonate in some part of the world, but definitely some good stories or good amplification way of reaching out to community can be easily shared, and it can be really helpful to everybody to understand how things happen across the world. And I have been fortunate to talk to a lot of young people over the COVID time, and I keep telling them, do great stuff and do share with others to understand what you do back in your own countries, so that it can be replicated, given how it, based on their own country scenarios or their own continent or their own cultural background. would be a great way of changing and understanding things. So I would love to shorten my speech and love to hear from you, what you've been doing back at home. Let me know if you have anything to ask about, or if you want to work with us. You're always welcome to work with the Arabic Climate Movement in the Middle East. Over to you guys. Thank you once again for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shafi. What a great presentation. So yes, now is the time for Q&A. So feel free to turn on your cameras. We do have a question that I'll entertain. So the question is from Shannon in the USA, who says, since many countries such as the United States are still very much in the middle of the COVID pandemic, what suggestions do you have for remaining active while also remaining safe?
Very good, Shannon. Thank you for that. Yes, this is what I keep reminding. So I know restriction has been relaxed in many parts of the United States and many parts of the world across different countries. What you can do at this point of time, I keep telling, is like use social media, and especially in the United States, you can call your representatives or your governor or your Senate heads in your own states to push them to understand what's happening there. So you don't necessarily have to be on the ground, because making sure that you are safe, and which is at utmost importance. The way is that to reach out to your community leader through telephone or through social media, through any other means of virtual reaching out to them. That would be a good way to do that. And the other is to campaign around social media channels. Social media is a great tool when it is used in the right way. And I don't think there is any better tool which did work during COVID time, and in the previous too, and in the post-COVID world as well, is the social media the greatest way to reach out like young people as us. And I would definitely say some of the tools on social media are great leverage to reach out to young people and put pressure on your representatives back in your own home countries. And this would be a great way to do that. And like I mentioned, safety is most important, and making sure that even if you have any social gathering to meet your friends or fellow advocates, make sure you maintain the social distancing, maintain having sanitizing yourself, your hands, and not to hold hands or hug each other or necessarily stay safe from each other. But understanding the current scenario, what you're facing is so doomed that we cannot let down, because this has been used by many countries. This lockdown has been used by many countries to take advocates away like us from the real meantime conversation around environment and climate and human rights. So if we let them down in the name of COVID, they would be dominating that okay, now it's the best way to subside us is to say, hey, COVID safety, you are not supposed to be there. But given, I would say, if you keep every safety lessons on the book and you do a right things, and nobody can stop you, and that would be a real change that would you need to dare. Because of course, keeping all the safety things, definitely you can have your social gatherings, bring up the fellow advocates in your region, bring up the young people from your part of the city together, and go to your representative, talk to them, or hold some social march if you want, or you can do a sort of online march. There is a lot of online version has been done. I don't know how much productive it has been, but given the fact now you can go individual basis, or people of 10 can go to the representative and meet them and put up the petition and try to talk to them and understand what their city or the government has been doing, would be great way forward. Do any of you have any questions, or do you want to share something what you've been doing? Let me know. I would be happy to hear about your stories too.
If I may, I have a question, which is, what would you say is the difference between what a youth advocate can do versus an adult advocate, especially during these times that are so unprecedented? Or is there a difference at all?
Well, I'm almost into my adulthood. So I really don't see much of things, but what I would see is that a big difference would be they're more charming, and they're so passionate, there is something that, you see in their eyes, makes a lot of people to realize that would be your brother or sister or son or daughter. I mean, there is an emotional call. This is my personal, I don't know if this makes sense to most of you, but this is what I felt when, I see a young as creator or 19 or 20-year-old having a call with me and like, hey, this is what I do back home. And they're so, you might find as in myself, I mean, being on an activist for like last 5-6 years, I find like, hey, I never thought about how charming way of, advocating some stuff in a very, very cool and, very humble and cute way. But that also, overwhelms people. And, that gives an emotional touch to many of the stuff that will touch families and parents and, moms and dads, and that is so heartwarming. You feel that sort of thing when and also, I find in teen and adults, teens are more aggressive and maybe given the fact, over that we finish that teenage towards adult, we find it more, we are more, we are aggressive, but we get more political, some player. I mean, I wouldn't say Neeshad as an activist being political, but, there's sort of things coming up, as an adult, or even in the environmental advocacy sort of, there are sort of, environmental advocacy is not like free from all this societal issues too. There is divisions and people, hierarchy issues. And when it goes to teen, they don't give a damn. That's sort of, that's something I feel a big, huge difference. They are all together in a big cause. And when you come to adulthood, the ego comes in front, and so many things. Of course, when you are adult, you have so many issues and emotional stuff comes in between your work and stuff, and that definitely has a serious issues when you are working with a lot of young people around you. But unlike teen, I mean, they're in an age which is like, super strong, and their desire is that great to achieve something, and that is something powerful, and that I personally had a privilege to be part of such great conversation or marches when I was in New York and in Poland. So that's a lot of difference I feel is that the charmness and the simplicity they do it. We have a lot of complications. I don't know if that's something wrong with the adulthood, but definitely they do things in a cool way, unlike adulthood like us would be doing. But definitely we learn, end of the day, what we're doing is to push our governments and corporates to do the necessary actions to take, and also push our community to do that. So the mission and vision is the same, but the path can be different. Adulthood may be having more legitimate way of reaching out to the community or to the leaders. A teen would be using their charmness, and they use their age as a leverage also to get to the same message. But like obviously people say, what is required is the end result, no matter what path you take forward. So the difference may sound kiddish to you, but this is what I felt during me myself being adult, and how would I rate what is teen and adult activism so looks like or sounds like.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. We have a lot more questions in the chat. So the next one is from Mariah from Spain. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected climate change in a bad way. As we know, the COVID-19, so I guess the question is, how has COVID-19 affected the climate change in the environment?
Well, in terms of the real environment, 2020 was supposed to be the decade of action, because we had 3 international summits where we wanted our global leaders to make necessary signatories or necessary actions which they require. There was Global Biodiversity Summit. There were COP26 to be happening in Glasgow this year, which is posted to next year, and also IUCN Biodiversity Summit. So there were 3 huge summits that was so important to humanity, and how our whole ecosystem and the human existence that are being raped has been completely moved. And it gave also, I mean, I wouldn't say that moving to a next year was a drastic impact. What impact was like what COVID does was a great lesson we learned, that it's not just a summit. If we're not making real actions in every country that is supposed to be a part of those sort of agreements, we will have more summits. But the problem is, are we obliged and doing things at the right place? Yes, impacts of climate on the climate has been studied, and the latest report which came last day, I read on the physics.org, is that the emissions were never reduced. It was presumed to have a drastic impact on the emissions, but the emission factors was high in some part of the world compared to others. But the overall emission has nothing to do with the emission reduction for the year 2020. So even COVID didn't have a great impact. That means our system has to change, and that would only happen. Concrete steps have been taken, how our whole society works in, and then only you will see the changes in the environment. But yes, implications of climate was going on, because like I said, even though you are sitting at home, the utilities we consume, the power we consume, the water desalination which happens, all required power, and definitely it was not coming from the renewable sources. It was coming from the oil and gas, or it was from the turbines which was used based on that. Another thing is not all the mobility is reduced. Like, airplanes were still running around, but was drastically reduced. The whole shipping industry was full-fledged, bringing necessary things, and things which is required for humanity's survival was taken across the world. Necessary supplies, food supplies, etc. So the emission overall never had any reduction. Of course, that means the environmental impact was same. Yes, we saw some good glimpses, because that's something to do with us and everyone. That you saw some of the birds or animals coming into the cities, or some of the rarest of views we never seen before. That's of course because we didn't bother them that day, and that animal in that place was supposed to be there, but due to the human encroachment or human pre-settlement, they had to move. So those sites were really overwhelming and understandably very, very good. But my scary thing was the same, what I mentioned in my talk previously. Those would have been a great example that we as a human shouldn't bother in the biodiversity how it is and live as it is. But what we do is we encroach there and do farming or build up our infrastructure, constructions, etc. And they don't have a space to live in. When they are given their own space, those animals coexist along with the humans. And that's how nature is building. But that has been disturbed over the years by humanity's encroachment or humanity's greed to encroach on to get on those fields. So overall, environment had the drastic impact even through COVID. But what we expected from our leaders and the global corporations to do necessary actions that is required, not to subsidize or not to bail out those industries. But unfortunately, that's happening now. And that's the biggest fear. And that is why we as a young people never have to back down. And we have to push again, do that advocacy, what you've been doing in the past, any form, online, virtual, or in person, based on the requirement in your country, do it in a more advanced ways. Get more people on board now, because now more than ever, people understood what is the reality is all about, and how vulnerable human beings are, how vulnerable our systems are. Even the greatest of the countries from the Europe and the Americas were, just to thrash us. I mean, we found, even the greatest countries who were supposed to be or believed to be having the best healthcare in the system in the world collapsed. If this is what a COVID can do, imagine the catastrophic impact of climate change would have to every country. If that climate change which we see now, one event after one in different part of the world, imagine one of the event that happens whole of the Europe, it would definitely be more catastrophic than the COVID which impacted Europe right now, or Asia right now, or in the Americas. So impacts on the environment didn't stop during COVID. This is the fact, and this is the reality.
Thank you so much. The next question comes from Atkins D from Zimbabwe, who asks, the process of getting meetings with local authorities is very bureaucratic, and also they might not pay attention to younger people. So how then do you tackle those obstacles?
Well, this is what, again, we have been believed or made to believe. Ever since last couple of COPs and climate summit, most of the countries are obligatory to make sure that young people are part of the mainstream conversations, and they're also given a table to have the discussions in your respective countries, no matter which part of the world or which country you are from. So when your governments or people say that it is more bureaucratic and you don't have a role to play, which is wrong. I would definitely say, and I come from a country or live in a country which has a quasi-government, because we are run by monarchy. If I ask you, does your people also have the same privilege of having a discussions with the quasi-government in your country? Yes, they're also obligated to have young people on board. That is why we were invited for the NDC discussion by the Qatar Ministry of Environment and Municipality, which is a government entity that is supposed to submit the national determined contribution as a part of the UN obligation, as a part of the Paris Agreement they are signed upon. So it is a sort of bureaucratic, but that is the process which we as young people has to be part of, because that's where all the game happens end of the day. If we are not part of what the government is going to do, the corporates, and what are the policies they want to set, if we don't understand that politics, and that is the information we need, that's an intel that what your country is doing. That is something most of the countries or young people doesn't have. Yes, we need to advocate in one side. Another side, you simultaneously has to understand the policy that's been developed by the country and what are things they're going to put on papers, because end of the day, that is what to see. You can see some of the countries making obligatory or a random call like, hey, 2015, we're gonna have a zero carbon emission. Wow, that's great. But what is in the paper? I mean, that sounds very cozy, because many of the companies, including Apple and another international companies like Amazon, have been announcing one after another that 2015, they're gonna go carbon neutral. What is the pathway? You need to ask these questions, because this is tricky. This is how you win the market, because all these huge corporates have issues with climate. To bring people like us behind them, this is the only way of a gimmick they can do it. Yes, they have some great plans, but putting forward to action is a greater struggle. And it's not about Apple or Amazon, even the government struggles. So get into those bureaucratic hurdles, and that is required to understand what's happening. And like I mentioned, a lot of countries who is part of UN conventions are obligated to have young people in discussion. This can be seen in every discussion UN had this year as a part of UN 75. So I would recommend my friends from Nigeria and any other part of the world, do talk to legislators, and they are obliged to entertain you. This is the reality.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Loreto M. from Spain, who asks, if another virus appeared, do you think the situation would improve again? And why do you think people don't try to keep the environment clean as it was after being in quarantine? Clean in quotation marks.
I mean, the problem is with us, humans doesn't learn easily. I mean, that is where we as young people have to set examples. We need to lead as an example in our community, or maybe I don't want everybody to be a leader in a community. You can lead in your family, around your friends and friend circles. You can be that leader who leads your couple of friends to showcase that, hey, keeping neat is the simplest thing you can do in a day-to-day life. And that will definitely transform how society works in. The first part of the question was, sorry, I forgot. What was the first part of the question, if I may?
It was, if another virus appeared, do you think that the situation would improve again?
Well, this is what we expect. The whole comparison of climate change with COVID was the same thing. If a climate impact happens, are we prepared to take care of our people or your respective citizens in your own countries? The answer would be big no. The way our health system works has seen the loopholes, have seen they don't have the capacity, because given the population number, some of the countries were suffocating to have the number of beds for people to be taken care of, the required, what you call the air supplies or oxygens required for the people in such catastrophe was not available. So in a way, our infrastructure, our government structure isn't prepared for something what we had. And I'm sure they're not ready to face one more. And that would be more catastrophic. And that is why we say the comparative thing about climate environment is like climate would be more dramatic and drastic than what we see, because there is no hope of recovery, because either it can be a catastrophic weather event, it can be a whole fire, it can be a whole flooding due to a tremendous reduction of ice in the Arctic, and that can flood many of the countries. This can be a irresistible natural calamity, but that has a severe impact than COVID, because in COVID, many of the countries or people had some sort what called herd immunity. People survive, and all the notions that young people can survive, unlike people who have chronic diseases and who are 50 plus. So when it comes to climate change, nobody's immune. Nobody is having herd immunity of what we hear these days. We're all part of the mess, and you all will be washed away in one or other way. So given the fact, my understanding and how our countries responded to the COVID calamity, I don't think our country would be still able to face it, given the fact how much the resource they had to pull off now, and given the job cuts and economic issues facing in every country, every part of the world. I would say a big no. And this is what we say. This is a lesson to learn. And if governments and institutions don't learn from this greatest natural lessons given by our own Mother Earth, I think it would be a very difficult task for the survival of humanity in the coming years.
Thank you. The next question comes from Maria G from Spain, who asks, do you think making little things such as switching off the light, closing the freezers correctly, or disconnecting electronic devices could help with climate change? Or do you think we need to make other kinds of things to keep our planet healthier?
Well, at a very, very lower level, and when it comes to family and friends, these are the things, sort of build an understanding of what you're doing, rather than that simple act of switching off the light wouldn't have a severe impact. Okay, thousands and lakhs follow that. That's a great. So, of course, we've been always taught in our schooling days, hey, switch off the fans and stuff. And how many does that? I mean, we are still not learning those lessons, Yes, those acts have severe implications at a very local level. And that shows how much you understand those things from your level. Okay, when I say our level, it's like at a home level, how much I care of environment can be learned from that. Of course, you advocate or push for policy changes. You push the government to make changes. Yes, and you also have to change yourself. I mean, that sort of small little things is, what you call test to measure your fellow friends or advocates or activists, because you need to lead by example, and you have to push for that small changes at your home. Because I've been taught, I don't know, it is a quote from Gandhi or somebody else, that the change starts from your home. And you do those small changes is the biggest step to do a greater stuff. And that's what, when I say you end up marching, you call up the government, you call up a policy change, you work at the policy level at your country or state or government level. But yes, that's short and the smaller thing, which people say, hey, I don't mind if I put the lights on all the day or put my ACs when it's not required. It is required. I mean, that small changes will not make a drastic change in your country, but that showcases how you are and how much you care about your own surrounding and environment, and how much you are the leader of your own. So it is important.
Thank you. The next question is from Carla L from Spain, who asks, why don't people act taking into account the statistics and the consequences that it will have for their future?
Well, if that was the case, we would have been doing this now. I mean, I wouldn't be talking this. I would have left in 2015, ever since we have Paris Agreement, because statistics and all the scientific results from Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, IPCC, the climate, the science body of climate science from the UN, which comprises of one of the best climate scientists from across the world. They've been clear with data. We have the data and the information that is required to showcase what climate change can do to us and everybody. But the problem is how those are interpreted by our political governments and corporates. This is what we call the lobbying of the lobbying desk. This is what political establishment uses those data to send wrong information to public. It may, I mean, even take a big example of the United States, Trump just making a big announcement the other day on the debate that, hey, 1 million tree plantation and you move out of Paris Agreement. Another side, you push fossil industries, and another say, hey, 1 million tree campaign back in Davos last year when Trump announced along with World Economic Forum to support 1 million tree campaign. I mean, yes, that's one thing, but when another side, you emit more than what you're trying to support, it doesn't help. But there are implications, and that can be sought out when young people are having the right information and facts on the hand, and you push and showcase to your people that this is what it is. And if you don't understand, rest of the information can be a fake news. So what I say is that even though we have all the results and necessary data, our establishments uses in a way that is easy to going to fake news and make people think about climate change in a different way. And that's why people even still, good number of people are not a great believer of human induced climate change. Yes, they believe climate change is happening, but the human footprints are again neglected to a certain extent, just because those data have been really misinterpreted, or the way it has been conveyed to people is wrong, or sometimes people are not even aware of those data which we are talking about right now. So as a young people, it's important to you to showcase those data to public domain. Maybe some of the data are not easily comprehended by common people. So this is what we have to do, the educated class of people like us, bring them to the common man's languages of understanding what this graph or this emissions ppm, what is 3.0, what does it mean, what is 440 ppm means, what is 2 degrees or 4 degrees is all about. Many of the people doesn't understand, especially when the young people also. So it's also understand when you're doing campaign, you have to build the knowledge around your people. And so they are aware of those scientific terminologies or scientific data. So it shouldn't be a blind-faced campaigns. You need to understand what's the climate science is talking about and what is that relevance to your country or the region or your continent. And that is a very important thing. That's why data are important. Maybe most of the public aren't aware of, but we are saying people who are part of the climate advocacy and activism understand those important data and how you can break down to reach out to people, maybe through infographics, or maybe you can use some local languages, or do some sort of a presentation to your local community through virtual or in person, so that they understand the breakdown of those data, because scientific data are always deep, and it's not easily comprehended at some times. So it is very important that we do that.
Absolutely, thank you. The next question is from Rose Williams from Mexico, who asks, which would be the best advice you could give to teenagers in your experience?
Well, teenagers, I don't give them advice basically, because I get a lot of things to learn from them. Frankly, recently, like 3 of my recent executive board members are super teens who joined my NGO recently. It's immense pressure. They have a lot of creativity or thoughts that you will really not hear from adults. Like, hey, have you thought about this way of campaign? I'm like, oh, I never thought about. I mean, that sounds crazy, but wow, that would be really impactful. My advice would be simple, and keep that simpleness in yours, because that's the most charming thing of how teen advocates come into the climate picture. Because I remember in 2015-16, we didn't have much of teen part of this whole climate conversations, and ever since they are moving to it, reventure and took up the climate advocacy into the next level. And definitely we owe a lot to those young teens like you guys, and of course this is a joint battle. My advice would be simple: your simplicity, your kindness, and your amazing source of inspiration really gives us energy. And also my advice would be simple: keep things simple how you have been, because the more you get into complicated stuff, that would really get you to take a different path. So right now you guys are doing amazing thing. My advice would be, the best thing you do is the simplicity, because that's what everybody loved in the teen advocacy or teen climate movement across the globe.
We still have a couple minutes for questions if anybody has any more that they'd like to add in the chat or by raising their hand, the raise hand function. Yes, there's a question from Gibran Al-Zadar from Yemen, who says, is the coronavirus crisis also threatening domestic efforts to meet already pledged climate commitments?
Well, it is. In a way, if the government had great plans pre-COVID, this wouldn't have been this drastic, Now we have seen a lot of job cuts, especially in the oil and gas industries. Fossil fuel-based industries have been quite norm, especially in the Middle East. If you are from Yemen, you should definitely know it. If that would have been in the past, just imagine giving a scenario right now. What if there was a job created in the renewable sectors? I'm talking given a context from the Middle East. If there was a job created in renewables, these people are not losing jobs, because even the whole oil price issues wouldn't have impacted so many as like right now. I mean, I have a chunk of people who lost jobs in the Middle East from the oil and gas sector because of the oil sector crashing down, markets crashing down during the COVID and the economic stuff. But imagine if it was another way around. In pre-COVID, they made the necessary changes required as a part of their obligation to all those agreements you hear signing and MOUs. Would have been a different story, right? But yes, now meeting that would be a tough task, an uphill task, but not meeting would be another disaster in waiting. So yes, your question is super correct, but this left the government with no choice. It only make them to take those concrete steps now before it's too late. Now, at least I say there's another chance. Yes, it wouldn't be an easy stuff, but it would be worse in the coming days.
Okay, I believe that's all the time that we have to take questions, but I wanted to thank the speakers so much. Thank you, Neeshad, Shafi, and thank you everyone for coming. As a reminder, we do have a Spanish language social hour after this, and then there are many more sessions tomorrow, so we would encourage you to come to as many as you possibly can. And then we'll send some links in the chat to the help desk if you need technology assistance, as well as some other useful links. Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you so much, Mr. Neeshad, Shafi.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining. And thank you, Sharina, for co-hosting.